This is the yes, this is the cheerful part where we present how happy we are and how excited about AI we are to a general audience, which is now watching. Hi, everybody.
Hi,
Welcome to
everyone.
the next public AI seminar. It's my pleasure to introduce Raskin, who is joining us. Where are you from right now? Calling
I'm
from
in the Bay Area right now.
Bay Area. Yes. Asa is the co-founder of the Center for Humane Technology, as well as the Earth Species Projects, which I've heard a couple of truly amazing talks, really fun work. He's also has a background in film and was previously head of user experience at Mozilla Labs and a lead designer of Firefox, which is fun because we've been interacting with Mozilla a lot in this community lately, given the recent public AI white paper. Um, I'll just separately say I had the joy of hanging out with Asa at DWeb Camp this year, in which we chatted. And I still remember one thing that he said, which is that um, if you want to be an effective public speaker, you really have to not only think about how you speak, but how those words really reflect and carry forth the narrative and the story you've been telling through your actions in your
Mhm.
life. I think Asa has really demonstrated that consistently and throughout his actions and his vibes, and it's also, of course, his tremendous public speaking. So it's really great pleasure to have you, Teresa, to talk about the AI dilemma.
Thanks so much, Joshua. It's a pleasure to be here. It's nice to see some familiar faces on the Zoom. Um, so yeah, I think we were just talking before the recording began about Kim Stanley Robinson, um, and that we went on a hike with him. He's the author of um, the Ministry for the Future, and I went on a hike with him a couple months ago and I asked him about the future of sci-fi, and he, as a genre, and he said that it was sort of coming to an end. That is like our ability to imagine future states of the world 10 years out, like the axioms by which we know what's true are going to completely shift, and so it's hard to write good sci-fi that imagines future, so we can choose that or a different path. And we were just saying that, like, some examples of this are certainly, 15 years in the future, 10 years in the future, we'll have largely decoded DNA and like how life is made, and that language we're able to speak it fluently, change bodies in vivo. So the basis of like our bodies are going to be different. Already, as of last year, 1 out of every 1,000 words that humanity produces was produced by ChatGPT, according to Sam Altman. Um, and so that means if you go out, I think even just a couple of years, 4 or 5, we're going to start to have the cultural cocoon that humanity is within is going to be generated more by AI than by humans. Um, and in fact, because of the attention economy, that which is more effective is that which dominates. AI is certainly going to be more effective in the kinds of things that it does to get our attention and get our intimacy. And so whatever is the joystick that is the direction for more viral, more effective, like that's going to be the thing that dominates human culture. And we've already seen from social media, which is sort of like um, 1.0, AI 1.0, just choosing what feeds and items you see. Like, and that like caused democratic backsliding and like mental health breakdowns. Um, like that cultural cocoon is probably not the best one we want to live in. Certainly doesn't bring out the best part of ourselves as we head into AI 2.0 with generative AI. Um, and so anyway, I didn't yet mean to go into the consequences, but just pointing out how different the world is going to be and how hard, therefore, sci-fi was. And he's like, I'm glad that I'm at the end of my career um, because just like the epic poem can still be written but isn't, sci-fi is going to like fundamentally shift. It probably as a genre has a limited half-life. So anyway, I know this, I guess, is more of a seminar, and I'm supposed to do like 15 minutes up front. But I thought that was an interesting place to start the discussion. I don't know, Josh, if you wanted to like ask any questions, or like you said, that's an interesting place to jump in. So happy to do that here, or I can like also sort of continue. What is your preference?
Um, you know what? I'm happy to kind of like just go wild, do something crazy, just jump straight into conversation. Um, Generally speaking, yes, we do. You know, most speakers come in with like a 10 to 15-minute presentation. I've obviously seen the AI dilemma presentation before, but if you want to just jump in here, let's just do it.
Yeah. Well, let's pepper it a little bit so we have some back and forth. I have like some stuff I want to get through, and so I'll
Yeah.
make sure to get through it. Uh, but I feel like it's yeah. Let's take this. We have some smart people sitting in this call, so let's take advantage of it.
Well, maybe I'll just start with one quick question, just off the Kim Stanley Robinson comment, and maybe this will give a little bit of context. And by the way, heads up, folks, just recently, this is kind of because we just uh, confirmed Kim for a future edition of the seminar for season number 3, and we're sort of just like, hey, this is actually a really interesting sort of question around, what is our culture going to look like, and what does that mean for the parts of culture that we're familiar with, like sci-fi. The uh maybe to me, and obviously this is a seminar around public AI, right? Um, for me, this like just makes it even more important that our culture and the instruments that do produce our culture are in some sense like in public hands, or at least subject to certain kinds of public safeguards, and really emphasize public benefit as opposed to whatever it is that a private company, or I should say some sort of private profit maximizing, semi artificial intelligence decides like this is what we should be consuming as a society. And you can definitely see this very, very much so, this calculation very active in smaller communities, smaller countries, especially those whose native languages are not English, right? The Icelandic minister is literally saying right now, it's like, well, will anybody or any of our children be speaking Icelandic in the future? Uh, well, to make sure that they do, we better be putting our data into these large AIs, and they're giving it to OpenAI, right?
Mhm.
So there's this sense in which culture is being handed over to these large private AI companies. How should we be feeling about that? Um, like if you're Icelandic, or if you're part of a country, you're like Norwegian, or you're Swedish, or you're from Singapore, like how do you feel about that?
Yeah.
Um, That's like I think, deep and important question that we're only just starting to face, because this wasn't a problem like a year ago, even.
Yeah. And so I think this is a great jumping off point. And one of, I think, the most important questions to begin asking is, if you look backwards in time and you were to make any one group 1 trillion times more powerful than any other group, who would you trust with that power? Like, which government, which nation, which religion? And the answer is, of course, none of them. But that is indeed the place we are finding ourselves with now. That just a couple companies that have the ability to expand their inference fleets and do, buy 3 Mile Island, build the power generation, build the $100 billion computers, are going to have millions to trillions of times more power than everyone else. And so this means that the Apollo mission of our time is, how do we create something which is trustworthy enough to hold 1 trillion times the power, asymmetric power of others? Um, and just notice that our values as they stand now um, aren't articulated with enough nuance to hold that. Like the idea of free speech versus censorship um, ceases to make sense um, in a world where that which is viral gets the most amplification, because there's a difference between freedom of speech and freedom of reach or amplification. And so we need to update those values to handle the new technological reality. Um, in general, this is the case. I think of this as the 3 laws um, of technology, which is the first one. Uh, when you create a new technology, you create a new set of responsibilities. And it's not always obvious what those responsibilities are when you create the technology. So examples are, um, we didn't need the right to be forgotten until the internet could remember us forever. Or we didn't need the right to privacy until Kodak started to produce the mass-produced camera, and our image could be recorded everywhere. And it actually took one of America's brightest legal minds, Brandeis, to invent wholesale, and put it into our Constitution, the right to privacy. So that's sort of like rule one, that as AI becomes more powerful, as it already is, it's going to open up new areas, new domains that are going to need to be protected. And we are not going to have even the words or the laws yet to name them, let alone protect them. And AI is going to move faster and faster, meaning we're going to have less and less time to have the 15, 20 or 100-year discussion about what those new rights are before we get exploited. I think the attention economy is an exact version of this. So that's rule number one. Law number two is, if the technology confers power, it'll start a race for whatever new commons is opened up to exploit that commons for power. So attention is the one from AI 1.0, social media. And then the third law is, unless you can coordinate, then that race will end in tragedy, in tragedy of the commons. And we are essentially we're the final total addressable market, that in AI 1.0 social media, choosing what feed posts we see, that is a very unsophisticated, slightly misaligned AI, and it is destroyed a lot of the things we all hold most dear, including our ability to socially coordinate. And that is the one major thing we need to do to be able to solve AI 2.0, generative AI. And so the new race will be not a race for attention. What's much more valuable than attention is, of course, intimacy. And intimacy can mean like, a chatbot that you talk to that's a girlfriend, but intimacy really just means something that is really close with you, that understands you intimately. And that race to intimacy, the most valuable thing, we will get strip mined, just like the attention economy turned us into dead slabs of human predictable behavior. That's what's about to happen with the race to intimacy, but at a much, much bigger scale. And on the hopeful side, just imagine going back to 2010, and we said, actually, we are going to ban business models that use AI and reinforcement learning to optimize for human attention, that turns attention into a commodity. Imagine how different the world would feel today. We'd be living in a completely different timeline. And so I think we have this opportunity right now to say, well, let's ban business models which commodify human intimacy. And how much different the world will feel in 5 years if we do that. And that might seem very radical, but we banned the sale of human organs, and we banned the sale of human orphans. So in many places, we decide there are certain things that are within us or about us that the market shouldn't touch. So this is actually a very non-radical proposal. All right, I see a hand. So Joshua, what's going on?
Okay, I'm going to do one kind of point of order thing for everybody, just
Yeah.
to make sure everybody sort of feels welcome to just jump in. But then I have a question about this intimacy. If you guys have a question, I think you're all familiar with it. Just use the raise hand function if you want to jump into directly to conversation. Both raise the Zoom hand and raise your own hand with 2 fingers, so I know to add you directly. And I'll say at the roughly 30 point or 35 minute mark, I will turn off the recording, and we can hop into the Chatham House rules section of the seminar, when we can really go wild with all the spicy comments that we want. All right. My question, and obviously, please do, when give me a comment, just briefly first introduce yourself and turn on your camera if possible. Okay, I really want to dig into this question of human intimacy because I really didn't expect this conversation to go there. Uh, in social media, um, there's this often like this dynamic of private goods but social bads, right?
Hmm.
Like nominally speaking, like you use Facebook because like you kind of enjoy using it. You can see your mom's photos, whatnot like that. But at scale, it becomes a social bad, right? That we none of us chose in some sense, but now we're like kind of disassociated from it. There's all sorts of misinformation, and this isn't a place where we usually expect you know a public or a regulator or something like that to come in and articulate perhaps a right that says like let's trying to check this social bad while retaining whatever social good there is. Um, in AI, I'm kind of curious because like you couch it in terms of human intimacy, right? And that's, I mean, it feels that makes it even more sensitive, right? If
Yeah,
AI is
that's
your
right.
girlfriend, it becomes more sensitive, like how we structure interventions into this relationship that you have with this technical artifact, where the service that is delivered. Um, one instinct I would have is like, oh, like governments shouldn't be getting involved in like intimate situations, right? On the other hand, maybe it's like rights. There's a even more sort of a need for rights, the kind of the language of rights. Um, I'm just kind of reacting off the top of my head to this,
Yeah.
but it's an
Well, and
extremely
I just want to
interesting
make
sort of
sure that when I
conversation.
use the word intimacy, it is broader than just like girlfriend or boyfriend.
Sure.
Rather, it's like all the intimate ways that we get to be known. Um, and just to drive this point home, um, we are going to enter into an age in the next 4 years of total ubiquitous surveillance. And how can I say this? Besides just that, like everything online is going to be tracked. Um, if you look at the next generation of cell phone towers, in the next cell phone tech, if you look at Nokia's marketing material and all the market material, they sell the network as sensor. That is because you're in the terahertz range. Um, the network can detect where human bodies are, even in buildings, what your pose is, whether your mouth is open or is closed, like how you're moving your hand, what your breathing rate is, what your heart rate is. And they sell it as, well, um, this technology will enable us to detect when seniors fall at home. So it makes the world more safe. Um, but this is part of a general principle that AI makes the illegible legible, that things that you couldn't read before, that the AI couldn't read before, suddenly become easily known. Your micro expressions, your heart rate, all of your little tells, where your eyes are pointed. And that means there's an intimate knowing of us um, that we are going to be hard pressed to stop. And if you just let market incentives do what markets do, then that intimate knowing of us, the ability to predict what we will do from that, and hence intervene to change what we will do, um, will just be a free for all. We will have no protections for things that have a trillion times more power than us. And that seems like a really politically dangerous thing. And it also feels like emotionally, like whatever is those parts of ourselves which are ineffable, beautiful, those things are going to start to be um, commoditized. So I think this is why I use the example of like we ban the sale of human orphans and human organs. There are lots of things that the government says this is outside the domain of what the market can try to put a monetary value on, because putting a monetary value on it somehow demeans the thing itself. That's why we don't sell orphans, because it demeans the value of a human life. And so I think there's a really simple, clear thing we can start to do um, to protect ourselves. Oh man, I already see two hands, so I'll go into them, and then I do. There's some more just like high level context setting I do want to set at some point, because just to name, intimacy is one of the harms and directions things will go, but that's just one slice of very many. So I don't want us to get to just assume that this is the only thing that we're talking about. Nick.
Yeah. Hey, great to see you again. totally want to hear about many of the other harms, but this intimacy one is particularly interesting to me. It's in many ways the evolution of the kind of privacy conversation that has been brewing for a long time regarding the internet, in terms of the way that you're putting it. And I love using this language for it. It's reminding me of the kind of thesis of the extended mind,
Mhm.
and even to the extent, and for those who are unfamiliar with that, it's the idea that through the use of technology, we are like extending parts of ourselves out into our technology. It's easy to see this like in our cell phones already. And AI, especially with, perhaps AI agents, easy to see that, imagine that extending even further in that way. With what you're talking about, some of those biometric kind of sensing technology, it's easy to see that there might even be a kind of extended body in some way, in terms of Internet of Things, in terms of how devices can sense our moods and physicality about us. All of this is making me think about what would this. So I have a background as a lawyer, and so I'm thinking about what does it look like to actually like ban this model,
Mhm.
this potential business model in a practical sense. And one thing that I have been thinking about is this idea of like fiduciary responsibilities, maybe
Yes.
on the part of
Mhm.
agents, and even things like legal privileges. There are some privileges that we have, intimate connections, like with a doctor or with an attorney, or with a confessor, where we have special legal rights around how you have certain privacy rights with those people, that we want to make sure are not breached. That way, there can be genuine trust and intimacy in those contexts. So those are some of the things that are like stewing around in my brain that I'm thinking about. I'm wondering if you're thinking about any things like that, or if you have other ideas for what the kind of practical steps would look like to like how do we tackle this intimacy problem in some kind of like what would banning that business model look like to you, or
Yeah, I
disincentivizing?
love that you bring in fiduciary. That is acting, duty of care to act on the best interests of the other side, especially in asymmetrical relationships, doctor, patient, lawyer, client, therapist, client, like these kinds of relationships where one person has an asymmetric knowledge. And in fact, to do their job, they need to learn information about the other that is potentially that can be used to exploit. And in fact, this gets to the fundamental paradox of technology, which is that the better technology knows us intimately, the better it can be our servant, and the better it can exploit us. That is the problem we need to solve. Um, and so I think a fiduciary duty is a really important thing for any AI agent that interacts with us intimately must have. If it has an asymmetric relation over us, then this is not a consenting relationship. This is a fiduciary relationship, and we need to flip the category that technology is placed in so that we can address it correctly. So I think that's super, super important. Nita Farahani, uh, lawyer at Duke, has a whole concept of cognitive liberty, um, which is the liberty not to be like asymmetrically persuaded, to have like your thought to be your own. I think that's another interesting human rights way of entering into thinking about this kind of question. Um, but I think a lot more thinking is needed. This is the point. Like we need, it's almost like a philosophy market. We need to incent as many smart people as possible to think about what are the new distinctions and protections and rights and domains that are going to be opened up by this new technology. And in fact, we should be using a whole huge amount of the compute to start do this kind of reasoning. Right now, there's a 1,000 to 1 spending gap between the amount of money going into making AI smarter and more powerful versus making it safe, or making it public benefit. And like that doesn't sound very safe, right? But if you look at the human body, like just some biological analogies, how much of its energy budget does it use for the immune system? Well, it turns out it's like, 10, 15, 20%, depending on how sick you are. Um, uh, and so that gives you sort of a measure. What percentage of the budget of, say, a city, San Francisco, Los Angeles, Tokyo, is used for its immune system, fire department, water, sanitation, police, that kind of thing? Turns out 25%. So this gives you like a good like rule of thumb that at the very least, as we invent a brand new technology, we should be taking roughly 25% of that and using it for the immune system, for strengthening our society, strengthening our defenses. And so I think like we are completely off of that. So I know before we start switching over into the private mode, there are a couple of thoughts I wanted to have people have, and that is most important thing to know about AI right now is how fast it's moving. And it is moving, it's the one technology that is moving faster than the people who create it think it's going to move. It goes faster than the predictions. Of course, diffusing into society generally takes longer than expected, but the development is going faster than expected. And so that people can understand, like, why does AI move so differently than humans? Like, how much faster is this all going to go? I think a good metaphor here is thinking about like what built human civilization. Why does human civilization exist? It's because we have language, which is a tool that lets us transfer knowledge so that culture accumulates and knowledge accumulates. That is, you eat a berry, it makes you feel sick, you tell someone else they don't have to eat that berry. So that's the reason that civilization exists. But there's a kind of knowledge transfer that we can't do as humans with language. And that is, you can't practice piano on my behalf. I just have to do it myself. But AIs can practice on another AI's behalf and transfer that knowledge. So whereas humanity moves at a like additive rate, AI culture moves at a multiplicative rate. It goes much, much, much faster. And then to think about like what did O1 do, like the new GPT model from OpenAI. Like the way to understand it is that just like when the last round of scaling laws were proved, that is, it was shown that there's a relationship between how much data, how much compute, and the size of your model turned into results. Once that relationship was known, that's when the race began. When people started pouring in the billions of dollars, because you sort of knew not what features you get on the other side, capabilities, but you knew how much better it was going to be. We're at that place again with O1. So how do you get to better than human level intelligence, say with chess playing? Well, there are two parts to a chess playing AI. There's the language model part, which is sort of like the intuition. And that's trained by showing, Transformers, lots and lots of human games of AI. And then it learns a good intuition for a chess playing human. It sort of produces moves in the style of a good chess player, but it's not superhuman. It's just like merely pretty good. You then add search on top. That is, you start looking at all the different pathways of given this intuition, how does the game play out over here? And you build this tree of potentiality. And that's when the system becomes better than humans. This is the moment that we're hitting in O1, which is to say, GPT-4 has the intuition of a smart high schooler, makes good intuition, sometimes bad intuitions, but those intuitions can like lead to dead ends. What O1 does is it adds search on top. So it starts making trees of thought, of intuitions to see which ones work out well and which don't. The more time you spend making these trees, the better answer it gets. This is how you start moving towards things that are better than human. And so note that you can then just swap out GPT-4 for GPT-5, and suddenly it's not an intuition of a smart high schooler, but of a grad student. And you have search on top. And so one of the challenging things of being an AI is that you have to update what your beliefs are frequently. And so I had to update my belief. I'm like, I don't know when we're going to hit like whatever AGI is or whatever AI is. When you blur your eyes, you see like something over there. It was before I was like, I don't know, is it 2 years, 5 years, 12 years? There's data walls. It's hard to know. There's some big smear. And my timeline like dropped after seeing that this worked. So now it feels more like certainly less than 1,000 days until we're at things that can like beat humans in many economic tasks. Of course, diffusion again will be slower than we expect, but it's important to know. And then to call in a frame from Yuval Harari that I think is really interesting is whether you think immigrants are good or bad. I'm just going to like leave the moral question aside right now because it's a super hot topic in the US. There's a lot of feelings that we have around minds that come in and replace jobs. And note that, and those normally for like the immigrants that the US likes to talk about, those are for generally not the highest paying jobs. But note that these kinds of new digital minds are going to be displacing many, many kinds of jobs. And it's just and they're all coming from California. And so again, without thinking whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, it's just a noticing of the scale of what's about to happen to our societies, that we are entering into this kind of synthetic valley where more things are going to be produced by non-human minds that are going to affect culture, and we have never been in that place before. So we humans have always had a relationship with technology. We've always used technology to solve problems. And in solving those problems, they've always created more, bigger, different problems for us to solve later. And so it's sort of like we have a can, we kick the can down the road, the can gets bigger, but it's a good trade because we've solved the problem and the bargain hasn't come due yet. But we've done that for so long that the can is now the size of the world, right? To give just one example, like we invent plastics, which are amazing. I like life, generally speaking, with plastics. And yet forever chemicals is just one example of what plastics have produced. And now they're out in the environment, causing farm animals to die, causing like significant health and cancer problems growing. New York Times estimates that it would cost more than the GDP of the entire world every year to clean it up. And that's just like one of the problems that we've created. So the can is now the size of the world, and we're sort of, AI in some sense is the final one. And our shadow has come due, and we are left in this place where we have to decide, are we a 1 marshmallow species or a 2 marshmallow species? That is to say, marshmallow test is where you give a kid a marshmallow and they go to grab the marshmallow, and if they manage to do the delayed gratification thing, they get a second marshmallow. But the case we are with AI is as if there's a marshmallow in the center and many kids sitting around, and any one of them can grab it, and then we don't get a second marshmallow. And if we are a 1 marshmallow species, I'm not sure we're going to make it through. If we are a 2 marshmallow species, then I think we have a real chance. And the question is not so much just the what we must do, but the who we must be in order to survive ourselves. So I will pause there. Yeah, curious what you all think.
Well, let me start off by saying that was just riveting, Isa. I'm going to stop the recording now. Before I do so, could I ask folks in our public AI tradition to, in the next 3 seconds, please unmute your mics and join me in a raucous round of applause for Asa. Thank you so much for joining us. 3,
Clap, clap,
2,
clap, clap,
1.
clap, 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 clap.
Bravo!
Clap, clap, clap,
Bravo!
clap, 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 clap. The noise canceling is too good. We need to update this so we all have to say clap.
In the room. Also saying thank you. Brandon, I think you're up.
Well, not going to top the marshmallow line. That was brilliant. I have a saying. Well, I first have an observation, then